Jericho and the walls and everything that went with that. Joshua did not just happen. Moses very intentionally had relationship and formed Joshua over a long time. I'm sure Joshua could sit down and say, he taught me this, he taught me that. But most of what I learned by watching, I learned by doing with him, I learned by listening, I learned by perceiving, and I grew courage as I went on. Now, you hear me up here talking in front of you every week. You think that I'm really relaxed. Inside, everything in me wants to run in that room and lock the door so you can't get in. I hate it. But I've gained some confidence and some experience and a calling that God will not let me lie down, so you have to suffer with me. I remember, though, when I was going to university, coming from a very educated family, how daunting the wall of going to university and succeeding was. The pressure that I needed to do well. Fast forward several years, master's, same thing. How am I going to, I can't get a master's. Postgraduate work, same intimidation. But I learned, and the saying kept coming back to me over and over and over again. How do you eat an elephant? Finish it for me. One bite at a time. One book at a time, one paper at a time, one speech at a time, one miserable weekend studying when your friends are out playing at a time. That kind of courage and forming and shaping in the pragmatics of doing those things, as well as equal to what people learn is the courage that comes in and planted deep into their heart, is that shared journey together. I have the privilege, I could sit and I could name, well, in this season of life here, in this season of life here, in this season of life here, and I could name a bunch of people. One I've shared with you before, and I'll reference him for some context. Paul. For over 20 years, Paul invested into me. I remember things that he taught me. Don't get me wrong. He was very intentional and very good about that. But I learned more by sitting down over dinner, on a flight together, going back to the hotel room, in the conversations after, just watching, just listening, just observing, not doing it the best, and him coaching, not shaming me, but saying, you did really well. Maybe you would be more successful if, and he would coach me into being better. But most of the relationship with Paul was the shared journey of life. When we first left Portland and we went to Wellington, Suzanne's back in our hometown, our youngest Jay, who you all know, who would not hug me or let me console him for the first 2 years of his life. But Paul and Becky came to New Zealand to spend time with us, not to do anything other than to be there with us and give us courage. And then he exercised Jay. No. We did this dedication at our house, had friends and family over, and when he said amen, Jay turned and reached for me. So there's something spiritual in there. And if you've noticed, Jay, even at turning 21 this Friday, is still very affectionate. And Jay, get off, I'm trying to work right now. The investment of that relationship was just that, a relationship. Like Moses to Joshua. Now, we have grandparents in the room. We have parents in the room. We have yet to be parents in the room. It doesn't happen by accident. We don't raise up leaders for the church by accident. We don't prepare the next generation who will take over this church, serve in God's church, love God, disciple the generation after them by accident. In the first service, one of our sides people was Marion Cummings. Marion was part of the planting team that came from St. Peter's to plant this church. Margaret Thompson was the wife of the first vicar of this church. And they have sat here in this church for so long and invested so long. But they're now seniors. I'm not talking about the task, I'm talking about the relationship. The people up. Do you all come up and do our thing? And share. Now, you will recognize these three adults later things and sharing a relationship with Carol. And I've seen this and Carol said, of course you can. You know what? It's human. It is ordinary. Hey, Mr. Not perfect, anyone rules, but you with some funny clothes. We'll just get here. Go ahead and what you say. You want to lady. And we're going to talk a little bit about their story with you this morning. But first, while they're setting up and getting ready, I want to ask you this. Think in your head 3 people who invested in your life who made a difference. It could have been a footy coach. It could have been a librarian. It could have been a youth pastor. It could have been a parent. It could have been a grandparent. It could have been a neighbor. It could have been the policeman who put you in jail. But somebody who changed you, you can say, I am better for who I am because of that. Name those people in your head. Now, keeping the distance that makes you safe, share with 2 or 3 people. One of them, this was their impact, this was the context. Okay? Share that with those people around you. You ready? You ready? Oh, you'll be fine. This is the easy group. All right, I'm going to pull you back. And hopefully you're a little more courageous. I had to pull a couple of teeth, but I actually got 3 in the first service to share. Hopefully there's a little more comfort in this congregation to share your relationship. As I sit here and think about it, I'm really grateful for that person, and I'd happily tell you what their impact in my life. Anyone?
Mine was my longtime friend Barbara. Barbara after my accident who first got me out walking. But how do I say this? Barbara was like a second mother. She was always remind me how to behave. Saying, Graham, don't do that. Graham, don't say that. Always saying, Graham, you can do this. Graham, don't do that. Graham, but always remind me how to behave and how to be a real person.
Boundaries. Boundaries are love. Anyone else? Relationship you'd share? Okay. Yeah, everybody in this room feels like I will if nobody else will. So
That's where Tony met. Run into them sometimes at the supermarket and he'd say, what's God been telling you? And then he would say, how can I pray for you? And if I contacted him for that, he would say, Tony will pray. Tony sadly lost his wife last year, and I reconnected with him a little at her funeral, but he is one very dear, praying, faithful friend that I want to reconnect with more.
One last one. Yes? Come on up, you're in the back, come on. I'm going to stand on the step because you make me feel really small.
So my godmother, Margaret McConaughey, I've always knew her as Margaret McConaughey. Her name's Annie Rogers now. She moved to Australia. Everyone changes their names when they move to Australia. It's weird. But when I was young, she lived next to Wigsell Park in Nelson, and I would spend a lot of time at their house. And she was just so understanding of things. And it was grounded in her faith. She would always, if something she didn't understand turned up, famously, you had this satanic panic about Dungeons & Dragons in the 80s, and I was right in the middle of that. And my mum had this whole thing about it, and I had been playing Dungeons & Dragons with her son. And my mum confronted her about it, and she went, okay, I'm going to go away and pray. And then managed to to take the time away and change her mind and think through things through prayer. And she did this again and again and again throughout my whole young life. And that patience rubbed off on me, I think, more than anything else. The willingness to just engage spiritually and let another will take over. Yeah.
I know a few of your relationships that require a little bit of patience. How many of you have stories? I'm not going to call on you. How many of you have stories just like theirs or more? Yeah. We all do. We all have those people in our lives that are so important. Now, most of you know that... We have another one? You have a mic? Yep, good. You even get a second one. My office has moved, so now I look at this window and the ramp going up. And I have all of that light coming in there. It helps. So what isn't helpful is that single pane glass has this much audio dampening ability, particularly with this building here. So anybody on the ramp, at the door, down at the bottom, all of their conversations come to me. I have to forget a few in the Lord. But sitting there one day, working, not trying to, I'm busy, I got stuff on, I'm doing stuff, but I hear a group of our teenagers step out of the building and start talking about this blooming relationship with someone much older than them that you never would put together, and their abiding fondness, gratefulness, and affection they feel for her. And it was done in a teenage way. The great joy and just what a blessing she is and how thankful they are, and they never saw it coming, etc. So, with a little arm twisting and a lot of chocolate, I've convinced them to come up here. Now, they were really nervous in 9 o'clock, and you can imagine it'd be intimidating for them. In this congregation, hopefully it'll be a little bit easier, but they did a fantastic job. Now, first, let's introduce you to everybody for the few that don't know you.
Cool. Hi, I'm Jack. I work with the youth and also on the holiday program. I've been at St. Christopher's for about a year, but an Anglican and a Christian my whole life.
I am Miriam. I am going to Riccarton High School. I work with Oasis, the holiday program, Embers, which is an intermediate youth group, and yes, it's about the start of the year.
Hi, I'm Eli. I've been going here since about the start of the year as well. I don't really do much in the church.
I don't know how to see a lot of things she's doing. She's not in an official program. She's making goofy eyes for something she's up to. But yeah, so she's doing things like that. And she gets the youth together and does a little worship session. And sometimes lets them on. Now, you're going along, big teenagers. How did this happen?
Well, I first met Carol through Josiah. We had a worship night right before youth group. Carol had been praying for both Miriam and myself. At the time, I don't believe she knew who I was or who Miriam was. We kind of grew a bond since then, and she's slowly become more of kind of a godmother and grandmother figure.
Were you nervous when you first met her?
Yeah, definitely.
Why?
Probably just a lot of the age gap, and a lot of the time she just squished my cheeks a lot.
The Italian grandmother.
Well, the first impression I got of Carol was she made this presentation slideshow for me, and so that was quite cool. And then the second time, well, the first time I actually met her in person was at Eli's flat christening, which I've never done before, and then here's this old person that I've also never met before. So it's a whole bunch of new things all at once. So I was like, whoa, what's this? And I'm like, it's kind of weird.
I went to Carol's house for dinner's freight on a Friday lunchtime, and that's just how I met her, just her hosting me for dinner, and the food was really good, and the conversation was good too.
Now, when you were first going to her place, let's work it backwards again. When you first, what's it like when you go to her house? Say if you went this afternoon, what's it like?
Well, if I were to go, say, after church today,
we're getting a big ringing.
if I were to go to her house after church today, she's made it very obvious not to knock. She prefers just to walk in. Usually she's like, get up. We would probably just have a big chat, usually maybe about service or about anything else going on in life or faith. Have coffee, maybe some lunch or something.
You always do it on the offering tea.
Now to walk right in.
Now, tell me what it was like the first time you went to her house.
I don't fully remember the first time I went to her house. I believe it was for dinner or something, or a coffee or something like that. But yeah, I remember I was standing outside her house for probably a good 5-ish minutes, just petrified to knock. Yeah.
Are you the same? Yeah. How did you first get acquainted? I think that was good.
So yeah, I went to her house for dinners for 8. It was really weird and kind of awkward because everyone there was older than me, but especially Carol. It's like, what do we have in common? What can we really talk about? But I went a couple of other times. I did some weeding for her and just went and had a cup of hot chocolate and just talked to her, and slowly kind of realised that you actually have a lot in common. There's a lot to talk about. Obviously, it's not the same thing as I talk about with my friends because there's a whole age gap. But that gets me don't have anything to talk about. Just talk about different things.
And what is the relationship like? How much of it is just relationship happening? And how much of it is her speaking in your life or you're sharing something back to her? What's that like? Where does the heart come in the woman life?
Probably around 50-50. So a lot of it is her speaking to my life or myself, trying to speak into her life, giving her advice on a different view of things maybe. But a lot of the time we will be talking about faith and prayers and Bible verses and things along those kind of lines.
She's also just really good to talk to. She has some really good advice and, just a whole nother view that me and my friends don't have because she's had her whole life that she's lived and, so it's really good to get someone else's opinion like that.
And how much of the time is she just laughing?
Most of the time.
What has she done? Because you shared something in the first episode.
Oh yeah, so just it kind of comes up actually in conversations. So one day we were just talking, and then we got onto the topic of praying and how we pray. And she started talking about using scripture and prayers and praying some different parts of scripture, using it in constructive prayers. And it's something that I've probably heard before, but not from. I have applied it, and so from there I started applying it, and it's really shaped how I pray. Sometimes it's changed my life in a small way, not a massive revelation, but it's been something that's really helped my prayer and made it richer and better. So just normal conversations and things that pop up in them can really change and affect and alter us, and have had an impact on faith in a good way.
All in less than a year, by the way.
I've been really busy studying ones. Living on your own, can be lonely, but it brought an incredible amount of joy into my life. At first it was hard, knowing at my age and knowing how to relate to the younger generation. But I thought, as I said before, age really doesn't need to make a difference at all. If you relate to one another and do it the way God tells us to form a friendship, it's easy. And it has been very easy, loving these kids.
Now this relationship that began, did you know it was going to go here? Did you know you were going to have these specific investments? And a lot of their stories, it's not appropriate to tell, but a lot of their stories very intentional. But go from beginning till now.
No,
You had a grand plan, right?
Am I supposed to say yes?
No, that was sarcasm.
Oh, good. No, I didn't have a grand plan at all. I didn't know when Josiah asked me to pray. I didn't have a clue. I was a bit nervous, actually, wasn't I? Huh? But, yes. Now I've lost it. I'm at your sarcasm, but...
Not having a plan and it just developing.
Not having a plan. I think not having a plan it's benefited the relationship, because then you can just listen to what the Holy Spirit whispers to you, and you're open to hearing what the young say to you. Because they probably speak into my life more than I speak into theirs, to be honest.
Now, because you're like a nan to them, and you're on your own, and you're new to this church, I remember you not feeling, where's my contribution here? What am I going to do? And then this just kind of has happened. It wasn't this grand plan. Anything on the courage to get involved, or did God just bring them to you, or you knew you were supposed to invest in that one, or was it their initiation? How?
No, there was no grand plan, and God didn't. Apart from praying, I don't think God sort of pushed into me to form a relationship, but it automatically happened. I think once you start something based on God and based on the prayer, I think they realised that I wasn't a a half-wit, and I wasn't going to, or a fly-by-night. And I think they saw that maybe, oh, this old lady, she's genuine. And that's when they started to open their hearts to me. And so, yeah, God did what he wanted to do. And I must say, the richness, it far outweighs anything I've ever done, is having a relationship with the young people.
Could you relate how this relationship, some of the courage you have and how you've learned to do it? I asked her, I said, Carol, you draw them in and you draw them out and you speak into their lives. How do you do that? And without a breath's pause, she goes, I don't have a clue. And I said, well, go away and think about it. Because those of you who are teachers will know, we've all heard that the B grade students make the best teachers. Because the A grade is often very intuitive. They do it intuitively. But the people who have to work for their grade, whether they make an A or B, they have to think about and learn systems and processes to master a topic. And so she did go away and think about, what is it I do? And if you could share a little bit about that and then maybe relate that India connection.
Yes, when Michael said that to me, I thought, gosh, you know, that's almost like I'm trying to contrive a friendship to make a point, and I wasn't. And as I sat down and I looked at it, God gave me 3 words: identification, assimilation, and revelation. And I looked at those 3 words with these kids, and then I looked back to when I was early years, when I was young. There was a young girl, her family and our family were at the same church and Bible school together, and I was one of many Sunday school teachers, and it happened to be my turn on worship. And this little girl was standing on the front row. She was only about 4.5, jiggling up and down, and I just thought she wanted to go potty, but she kept trying to talk to me. So finally she came over, and I just tried to keep her quiet like you do. And she did that 3 times. The 4th time, she did a real Shirley Temple on me. She came over, she stamped her little feet, crossed her arms, and she said, Mrs. Carroll, God wants to say something. And I looked at Sally, and Sally said yes. So I held the mic to her, but she grabbed the mic. And she said, God wants, you've got to go to the service tonight. There's a man there that will have a key for you. Now, we did go to the service, and the guy did have the key that unlocked a ministry trip for us to the States. And as I was walking out, Sally said, you need to go home and read Psalm 8, verse 2. And if I may, I'll read it. And this is a paraphrase version of it, if I can find it. Because it really and truly impacted the way I looked at children and youth. You have built, this is Psalm 8 verse 2, you have built a stronghold by the songs of children. Strength rises up with the chorus of infants. This kind of praise has the power to shut Satan's mouth, and childlike worship will silence the madness of those who oppose you. I just love that part. Silence, down in the footnotes, is muzzle. There may be a vast difference between the glory of the heavens and the little mouths of children and babes, yet by both the majestic name of the Lord is revealed. It is amazing that the perfected praises of God do not rise to God from the cherubim and seraphim, but from the children and the babes. And all through, since the early 80s, that's something that I've kept in the back of my head. If it's good enough for God to listen to the praises of children, and if the enemy is afraid of when they open their mouth and speak praises to God, I better listen too. And going back to those 3 words, I was in India, and I had gone to do a job, and the pastor's wife said, I want you to come and teach. And it was into a slum area. And so we went, and we walked into this little room, and sat down, and these beautiful little Indian ladies, I mean, they're gorgeous, they're big brown eyes, but they just looked like they just stared at me. And their faces were set like steel. But one of the little boys came and climbed up onto my lap, and I was wearing a sari, and he just nestled in my lap, and he went to sleep. So we're sitting there, and Shalini said, do you want to speak? And I said, no. I was in fear and trepidation. I didn't know what to say at that point in time. So I'm sitting there, and all the other children had gathered around me, and the next minute I felt very warm. And I thought, Lord have mercy, that's not me. And
Every mother in the room knows what's coming.
Shalini is like this at me going, and here he had peed, and it's all running out under my knee onto the ground. And so the mother sort of screamed at the sister to pick up the little boy. I was ushered out the back, and I thought perhaps a shower, but I went out the back door, or a door, into an alleyway where men were laying on the ground smoking dope and sitting on steps, and there were 2 buffalo over to my right with a couple of buckets of water here, and they looked gross. And so they said to take off my sari, and I said, no, that's not happening. And so they splashed me with water and got soap and soaped me down front and back, and I thought, oh Lord. And then this one lady told me to turn around, and she threw the whole bucket of stinking water over me. And anybody that knows me, I hate smells, and it just was appalling. And then the next minute they started to try and squeeze me out like I was a squeegee, and I picked up my wet sari and I said, I'm off. So I went and sat back down where I was, and the little boy just got straight up on my knee. And he turned over and he just put his hand up on my chest, and he was just playing with my neck. And it was awesome. But it was another thing where God uses a child, but he had to get rid of my masks before he could do anything. The next minute the women all crawled around, and Shalini said, they said that you've become one of them, because I'd been peed on, and I was very grateful for that. But I still didn't want to talk. I was very nervous. They were still quite serious, but there was a point of identification. Every mother that's had little boys knows that we get peed on for years, not years, for a long time. And they could identify with that. And so then we started sharing about being a mother, they in the slums of India and me back in America. And that came, the assimilation part. And then gradually they started to open their little hearts to me and let me see the real them. And that was when I had to make myself vulnerable too, because at first you're in a position of power, and now God's already humiliated me. Here I am, I'm just one of the girls. And so I shared some of my life with them. And it was amazing. What happened out of that, the relationship. And I didn't say in the first thing, all those women went to church for the 2 months I was there, and they were Hindus. And I thought that was exciting. Anyway, but Shalini asked me if I would pray for them, and I said, no, I want them to pray for me first. And she almost had a fit, and she said, but they're Hindu. I said, I don't care. And that kind of led me, I thought about it when I was preparing for what Michael had asked me to do. A child had led me into relationship with these other women, and these youth are leading me into new relationships, and I think they're just extremely vital, and yeah, they're long lasting. Sorry.
It's okay. One more question, then I'm going to let you just say, I want to say this. But the question is, this relationship, did you have the confidence to initiate it, or did it take the older person? Because the age comes disparity of power or perceived power. does it need the older one to usually initiate that relationship? Go on, either one.
I think it's kind of a either or. So I feel like for a lot of people, they'd be too scared to go up to someone like Carol and kind of initiate a relationship. But for the relationship that we have, it kind of started when I asked her to be my godparent for my baptism. Before that, she thought I didn't like her at all. So she was quite surprised. But since then, we've really grown a lot closer and built so much trust, and shared so many stories and helped each other in each other's lives quite a lot.
What was the question again?
It's okay. I was looking in your eyes knowing you were going to say that. Does it usually need the older person to initiate and be vulnerable, and not that you're going to go wee on her, but to build a relationship? Does it normally take the older one to do that with the younger one?
Well, when I first met her, when we were christening Eli's flat, I was quite out of my comfort zone there. So it did help her to reach out first. And also for her to be vulnerable and genuine, it also helped that relationship. And for me to see that she's a genuine person, and that she has imperfectness as well, just as me, just as anyone else.
Are we on? Yep, cool. Yeah, I think it certainly helps when the older person reaches out, because it's quite intimidating to be like, can I come round to your house for a meal? Or do you want to come round to my house for a meal when you're our age? Dinners for Eight certainly, I think, really helped kickstart our relationship, because we have the meal and there's eating and it's kind of an organised thing. But having them initiate really helps. It makes it a whole lot less scary for us and puts, I guess, a lot less pressure on us to cook a meal or have a nice house for them to come round to.
Now, in your relationship, how much of it is her going, okay, I'm going to invest in you now, I'm going to make you a PowerPoint, and how much of it is just having relationship? How are you going? What's going on? What does that look like? What is most of the impact she has in your life, or the impact they have in your life? How much of it is prepared, and how much of it just happens?
I'm feeling a bit left out. I didn't get a PowerPoint.
You will by 5 o'clock.
But yeah, most of our investment just comes from having conversations and things just flowing naturally out of the topic of conversation, and her sharing her wisdom and me having a little tiny bit of knowledge to give back to her. And just, talking about our lives and being open with each other and being truthful and having a genuine relationship, rather than just one where she's forcing herself to do it out of an obligation, where there's an actual relationship and where we both want to be there.
You got a mic, go for it.
Jack, I don't think it's that you've got just a little bit of knowledge. It's different knowledge. I've got 21 years of knowledge. But don't
I'm staying quiet.
And you're just a young person, but you can give to me what I can't get from my peer group. And so that is so valuable. So never undermine the fact that you might say this. You don't. It's profound what you pass on to me.
She's up here pouring into their lives while they're sitting here. Yeah. Anything else you would want to say?
I mean, yeah, there's God and all that stuff, but it is also just a genuine relationship, like we do just connect with each other and we tell each other about our day. I could go pick up her groceries. But yeah, the God stuff is pretty important too.
I feel like majority of the time it's not, well, actually it's never really planned. It's usually just go with the flow, talking like a regular conversation. There's nothing different about it. She's always talking into my life. The first time I ever started opening up was because she first opened up, and I could tell that she was genuine and honest and confidential and everything.
Now look, special relationships, 6 to 8 months old. I look forward to the story being told in 20 years. I think one of the things is because I've got 3 people in their late teens, and a nana, 29 again, is that you think I'm only talking to someone senior and those very young. I remember having more and more members of my family die, and me thinking inside my head, well, who's going to adult this clan now? And going, oh, we're it now. We're the generation that is them. And I think all of us who are adults can identify with this. I think at each season of our lives, we're looking for somebody, maybe a peer, maybe just a little older, maybe 10 or more years difference, who can invest in our lives. So I'm not just saying, hey, go find a teenager. We've got more teens who need investing and loving. They've got parents, they've got teachers and coaches, they got a youth pastor, they have a vicar. But you know what? Having somebody older who's safe on the side is important. Even if you're 50, even if you're 40. I'm at the age where this Friday, the baby turns 21. Suzanne watched me watching him last night, and she goes, are you having one of those moments? No. Because I've got 3 young men now. And how do I parent at the next season? I'm dealing with my own aging. How do I progress into the next decade? We all look and want those people who matter. And too often for the church, it's become an event, an RITE, rite, that we attend, come get pumped up for the next week. And it's not a people, a whānau, an extended family living together, coming to do this rehearsal, which if you think of everything we do on a Sunday morning, it's a rehearsal for the whole week. That this is a family coming together, pouring into each other. Now, this is a grafted in Kiwi talking to all the native borns. You guys aren't great at relationship. And you stay silent too long, and you wait too long, and you don't initiate when the other is actually dying for you to initiate. And it's okay to risk it. And it's not always going to work out, but sometimes it will. Stephen and Sarah's son, first time I wanted to connect with him, he was like, yeah, right. And he calls up his mom, nice try. And now we have this fantastic relationship of honesty. I'm not replacing Stephen. I could never be his dad, but I can speak in areas from a different angle, not because I wear a collar, not because we talk about serious things. In fact, most of the time I listen to him talk and his stories, and I just celebrate him. Every one of us can do that. If you're in your 60s, who's in their 40s? If you're in your 50s, who's in their 30s? And you can continue the math down. Is that we need to become a body of people who go and share the journey together and who have people to turn to when it gets really hard. And that way they'll stop calling me so much. No, I'm just kidding. I want to pray for them as I send them down, and we'll continue. Loving God, thank you for these 3, for Eli, for Miriam, for Jack, and the many others that they represent in our church. God, thank you for Carol and the many others across several decades who just love and invest and spend time. Initiate and ask somebody for a coffee, ask them for a lunch, speak into their life and lift them up, check on them when things go down, and model how to follow you closer. God, we all know that we don't know how to grow in our faith, and sometimes we need it just lived out in front of us or encouraged and modeled for us. Help us grow the next generation for the next generation. Thank you that we're your people. Thank you that we have each other. Every time we hear Moses and Joshua, may we be spurred and encouraged to be such a people. For the sake of this community and this city and this land. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you. Encourage them at morning tea. It took a lot of courage to sit up here on both sides And I hope it encouraged you and you enjoyed it. So, yeah, please.